It's Alicia from Let's Ghost on Patreon, and today I'm just going to do a quick video to show you about one of the resources that we use whenever we are doing a large historical research of a ghost story on Let's Ghost. These videos I'm going to start doing on our YouTube from Let's Ghost are going to be free. It's just to be able to share with the audience and the public how to access some of these resources that we talk about on our Patreon. If you're interested in joining our Patreon, it's $1 a month at the lowest tier to access all the videos that we do. We ghost hunt using historical research and facts to validate or to answer some of the questions from ghost stories all around the country. So today I'm going to be sharing with you how to use the Library of Congress as a resource whenever you're doing historical research. That could be academic or for ghost hunting. It does not matter, but it's a really great resource to use and it's really fun. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to share my screen. And to get us started, I found a ghost story, and that was just doing a quick search on Library of Congress. If you want to access Library of Congress, you would just go to loc.gov, takes you right to it. You can search anything. They also have digital collections, library catalog, researchers, etc. It's a great resource. It's completely free. Get in there, start researching. So I just did a search for ghost stories in Georgia between 1900 and 1915, and this is a story that came up. It actually is from the New York Sun, Perth, Amboy, New Jersey, but the Savannah Morning News printed this on September 1st, 1901. The original story did run in the New York Sun on August 29th. So this title goes, this ghost choked a man. And what I'm looking for out of this story, first of all, is going to be keywords. And the only thing I want to do on this little resource search is validate the housing that is mentioned in this story. You can use the Library of Congress to validate a lot of different things. They have this link we're using is Chronicling America. We'll talk about that another time. But today I'm going to use what's called fire insurance maps. And usually it's by Sanborn, fire insurance maps, but that was just the company name Sanborn. There was lots of other companies that did it. What they usually can tell you, though, is kind of the layout of a city, especially from late 1800s into early 1900s and so forth. And they tell you what the buildings were made out of, how many stories there were. They show you where in the city that they were based on, their location, what streets they were on. And Sanborn or fire insurance maps are super helpful because if you're ever searching something, say we wanted to find a ghost story of a lady in an alleyway, we can go ahead and see if we can find the building that is mentioned nearby, see if there was an alleyway actually there, and see through time if the alleyway was ever covered up with more buildings built, or if they expanded a building, etc. So even if you have this story of a lady in an alleyway, but the alleyway no longer exists, or you never have seen it, you can go back in time using these fire insurance maps and see there was an alleyway at the time that this story would have originated, and you can kind of validate some of your facts. So today we're going to use this story about this ghost choked man, grab some keywords, and see if we can validate the housing that is talked about in this story alone. So this ghost choked a man, was driven off by howling by wife's scalding water. Marco came back from the grave and made things lively in his old tenement. Gamblers saw him fade like the Cheshire cat, and ghosts exorcised. So one of the best authenticated ghosts in the ghost history of ghost-ridden New Jersey. has been exercised by the efforts of Father Januszek of the Slav Roman Catholic Church here. I apologize if I did not pronounce that name right. I will do my best to pronounce names correctly. For several years, John Marco, a Hungarian laborer, lived in a two-story tenement in Mechanic Street near Washington Street. So first of all, we know that it was a two-story tenement in Mechanic Street near Washington. So we have it pinned down already where we're going to be looking in Perth, Amboy, New Jersey, Mechanic Street near Washington Street. And it was a two-story tenement housing situation. He lived as a just and hardworking man should. 3 months ago, he died. So far as may be learned from the reticent survivors of his family, there was no one in the community to whom he bore ill will. So no one knew if he had any, hard feelings against anybody in the community. There was nothing left behind which might have been expected to tempt him to come back. But he came back. He came back early and often. He came back as often as Bert S. Kohler has announced his retirement from politics. A nice little political joke in there. Marco couldn't stay away. There was something about that ground floor tenement with its dingy yellow walls and narrow backyard and ill-smelling open sewers in front that exercised an irresistible attraction for the spirit. Marco's ghost at first attracted attention by low but strenuous moans. The departed laborer had a peculiar voice, and even in moans it could be distinguished from any other voice that the neighborhood had ever known. The first time those moans were heard, everyone in the neighborhood knew that Marco had come back because something in the place to which he had gone did not suit him. Another big key, hint is that the whole neighborhood knew of him and these moans, which means it was probably close-knit, which means there was probably a lot of people living in this space. So, for a time, the popular feeling on the subject was altogether negative. That is to say, nobody expressed an overwhelming desire to live in the home of the late Marco. As one little girl of the neighborhood said to an earnest investigator, everybody says, I think I'd let somebody else live there yet. So nobody wanted to move into this space. But 2 weeks ago, last Sunday night, matters came to a crisis. The tenement is a double house, so we understand there's 2 sides to this building. There are 4 apartments in the building, so it's going to be first floor, second floor, 2 apartments on each floor. And Gene Matlock, brother-in-law to the ghost, lives in the upstairs flat on the other side of the double house. A week ago Sunday, when Miss Matlock was in a shed at the back of the yard, so there's a shed now in the back of the yard, Gene started across the yard to speak to her. He was grabbed by the throat and thrown flat upon his back. He shouted for help as he fell half strangled. Mrs. Matlock came from the shed and saw him lying before her with a shadowy figure kneeling on him. She ran into the house, took a kettle of hot water from the stove, and went back again. She found Jean and the thing wrestling all over the yard. What is the matter? Get off my husband, or I will scald you to death, she cried in Hungarian. So we're going to stop right there with the story. We have a lot of information. So what you want to do when you're doing any research is pick out some keywords. So key information that we have is this is in Perth, Amboy, New Jersey. John Marco lived in a 2-story tenement in Mechanic Street near Washington Street. This specific home would have had a shed in the backyard and would have had a long backyard area and space. Something to know about tenement housing was tenements were apartments or houses that were split into multiple living spaces, especially during the late 1800s, early 1900s. This is when industrialization was booming and immigration was really coming. A lot of people were coming to these larger cities to work from other countries because they needed money and to make a living and have somewhere for their family to go. And of course, the whole American dream, it was really catching a lot of people's attention because there was just so much work to be had in these cities. Tenement housing, though, was spaces that where these laborers and these families were living, and they were in really deplorable condition, very unsanitary. Usually it talks about the sewage out front of the house and the dingy walls and all those things about these houses. They usually were not kept up very well by the landlord by any means. And these people that were really hardworking, and these families were just trying to make home out of this space. But a lot of times tenement housing was 1 to 2 rooms, possibly. Usually you may have not even had a kitchen. You may have just had a room for bedrooms and like a sort of little kitchen, or like a stove. Not even, sometimes it may have been, stoveless, depending on the situation. Kitchens usually were at the back of a house. So if this was a house split into 2 stories, 4 apartments, and a double house, there was probably a kitchen somewhere at the back of the house, or even could have been in the shed. It just depends on what the setup was for that specific location. But tenement housing in general was not very secure or safe housing in the first place. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to use this information that we have, and we're going to go ahead and go find these Sanborn maps and see if there are any for this location. So we're going to go to Library of Congress, which is loc.gov, and we're going to just search Sanborn fire insurance map, and we're going to add in New Jersey to the search. We want to narrow our really large search down as much as possible here. So here we already have New Jersey Sanborn fire insurance maps, but there's 82,000 results. That's too many for us. So now we're going to narrow it down even further. So we are in the United States, and we're going to go to more locations over on the side, and we want to find New Jersey. We see it right here, but you can also go alphabetically to search for it and narrow it down even further. Oh, it took away our fire insurance maps. Sometimes that can happen. So we're going to do that one more time. Fire insurance maps, New Jersey. So instead of narrowing down by United States and New Jersey, I'm going to just see if I can find Perth, Amboy. So we went to the letter P for alphabetically, and there we go, Perth, Amboy. Here we are. So we're back to the fire insurance maps, and the story was, it was published in 1901. So we're looking for something as close to that date as possible. You can see the dates of publish under the title. And here we have one from 1901, June 1901. So this would have been published just around the time that he may have passed away. If he passed away 3 months before, August 29th, so it would have been like May into June kind of time frame. So this is 25 images. We're going to go to the first image, and you'll see on this map some color-coded blocks. This is just telling you what parts of the city are shown on the map pages after this first page. And so each part is blocked out, and then if we go to that page, like page 3, we are going to see up closer what is in this block of the city. Some areas of the city were not put on these fire insurance maps just because the population density was not that large. So they're really going to focus on more dense population areas. So there's not always fire insurance maps for every single area. A lot of times it's mostly big cities, especially during early 1900s. So we are going to actually look first at the key. This kind of tells you some information about what you're going to see whenever we go to the next map. This is up here, number of stories. It's going to tell you a number for how many stories are on that building, what kind of roof it had. There's an X for shingle roof. Composition roof is a black circle, and slate or tin roof is an open circle. Then we have these little hash marks for windows and iron shutters. And if they're on the first, second, or third floor, there's one for first story, 2 for second, 3 for third, so forth. The color of the building is going to be yellow for frame, red for brick, blue for stone, gray for iron. So we want to kind of remember a few of those things, and then we're going to look for Mechanic and Washington Street. Sometimes you can find them in the index over here. I don't see them at first glance for Mechanic Street. So I'm going to go in, and here we go. Here's Mechanic and Washington, and we were told he lived on Mechanic near Washington. So it's going to be somewhere in this area. And if we see this huge bold number 6, that means that we're looking for map number 6. That's going to show us a more zoomed in area of this, or zoomed in version of this area. So we're going to go to our image drop down, go to number 6. Sometimes it may be a little bit further, so I'm going to show you what to look for there. And here we are. If you see the number 6, it's up here in the top corner in bold. You're always going to see your number for the page that you want, or the map that you want, somewhere on the page in bold. Sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's over on the side. This one is in the top right hand corner. So here's Mechanic Street, and here is Washington. So we are looking, it's going to be probably either side of the street right here. And so we're going to look at these different houses. So we have on both sides of the street, if he lived on Mechanic, so it's not going to be these ones facing this side. And there is probably, but it could be any of these that are here because there's a shed out back and it's listed as shed. But we can see these dwellings. They have a D on the building for dwelling. They're yellow colored, so they are a frame building. So that means like a wood frame, anything you could think of, like your house is probably made out of a wood frame, and it would be considered to be yellow on one of these maps. So we are looking for a house with a shed and a long, narrow backyard. So these don't really show the property lines. They could have had a property line here. This one right here has a building out back. 1 story. Looks like it was probably a shingle roof on that. May have been a shed. Another one over here, number 68, 2-story dwelling. This has a shingle roof, and then out front has a 1-story front porch with this open circle, which is a tin roof. It has 2 buildings out back. This one with the X on it is actually a stable for horses. It does not mention anything about a stable, so I'm going to go ahead and say this is probably not the house number 68. So we could look at this house. This shed looks like it may belong to this house that's actually on Broad Street. So it's almost safe to say that's a 2-story shed. It's probably not the house that we're looking for. I'm going to go over here and look at these 2 houses. So these both have a 1-story building. This one is attached on the back. This one is in the back with some room between, and then a long, narrow strip of land behind it, which could be the backyard. Now, to look again, this is a 1.5-story house, so it's not a 2-story. And it could be easily taken out of the equation. And my thoughts are really looking at this one, number 65. Two-story dwelling, shingle roof. Could have easily probably been split into 4 houses. There's a shed in the back, 1 story. There's some room between the shed and the house where a brawl could have taken place. And there is a large backyard, as they mentioned in the story. So I'm going to say this looks like this might be the spot. Mechanic Street, number 65, near Washington Street. The only other house that could be possibly it is right here. This two-story dwelling, number 57, with a building all the way back at the end of the yard, 1 story. This looks like it's facing inward or sideways on the property, which is kind of odd. And maybe it was an add-on to this dwelling right here. But if we can see another thing about the story, as they said, there was a lot of people in the neighborhood. They all knew the Moans. This is a lot of people living in this area. If you notice, many of these houses have an open circle, which means that they had tin or slate roofs. Very easily could have been tenement housing here. With the tin roofs, 2 stories. There's these little 1-story add-ons on the back of these homes, which is usually probably your kitchen. Not typically going to really be a porch. Could have been a porch on some. Kitchens were usually towards the back of the house, but as of right now, I feel pretty safe saying there's a good chance it is number 65 Mechanic Street near Washington, that Mr. Margot probably haunted this house and had a brawl with his brother-in-law here. So not necessarily super sure, but there's so many other ways I could verify this, and we'll go over those another day on these resource videos. But I just wanted to share with you how easy it was to use this resource, look at some information, and validate something from a story with some historical fact or backing to it. Please feel really empowered that if you have a device and an internet connection, that you can do research pretty much anywhere, from anywhere. You can get some real solid information, look things up, go down a rabbit hole. I really, really want you to feel empowered by learning some of these resources and just find something fun for yourself. Last thing I'm going to share with you real quick is if you want to learn more about tenement housing, especially in New Jersey during the turn of the century, this is a really great article by Mary Buell, Sayles, Housing Conditions in New Jersey. And she is a fellow of the College Settlements Association. This was published in January of 1903, so it's got a lot of information that was very, very pertinent for the time frame that we were just searching, talking about this working class, these immigrants who were really hardworking people living in these conditions and what they would have been going through at the time. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you so much for joining me on this informative video. Hopefully this wasn't too long, but I just really wanted to share some of these resources with you. And if you want to get into some further ghost hunting with us, please join our Patreon. It's $1 for the lowest tier. Otherwise, subscribe to this YouTube channel for Let's Ghost. We'll be sharing more resources as the weeks go on and months go on, so that way you can kind of understand what resources we are using in real time as we do our ghost hunts on Let's Ghost, and then you can use them yourself, because we really, really believe that everybody should have access to these resources and they should get to know how to use them and have this empowered information at your fingertips. Anyways, I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.